I'm Ellen Keenan O'Malley and I'm a Senior Associate in the Commercial IP team at EIP. I think what's important is AI regulation is not brand new, and although the media might present the EU AI Act or the UK AI white paper and all of that and the US Executive Order, all of these things is like something that's new, it's not. And I think the term artificial intelligence was first used in 1955 by Dartmouth College by a group of researchers, and I think that there's already been regulation to govern the use of artificial intelligence, but maybe not coined as specifically to artificial intelligence. I think right now it's a question of whether we need specific laws and regulation to govern AI in particular, which is what the Europeans AI Act is specifically aimed at, and it's taken a risk-based approach, not sector-specific, whereas the UK's approach is that their view is each sector has its own risks, and therefore the existing regulators for that industry should be what's governing it. And I think you've now got the Online Safety Act that recently came into force, is sort of supplementary to AI regulation and other existing, UK laws. One might say there's not gaps because of the fact that we've already got various existing laws and regulation that are geared at specific sectors. The question though is, I suppose, whether the existing laws are fully fit for purpose. And I think one of the key things I find most fascinating to look at as an IP lawyer is in copyright infringement. So for example, we're obviously seeing Getty Images, and one of the main cases in the UK, it's the first one we're seeing in the world of AI and copyright infringement. It's to see whether our existing IP laws are adequate to balance innovation in AI versus the IP rights holders. When the various IP regulation was put in place, and you've got the Patents Act and you've got all these different laws, they probably weren't drafted at the time to be thinking about generative AI and what we're now dealing with today. And so I suppose that is a potential gap in the sense that how it's applied and how it's going to be interpreted. Are there ways around to say, actually, that was a bit of a grey area and we've fallen this side and therefore we're not infringing? It's not necessarily that there's a blatant gap in the law, but it might be that there's ways that bad actors using AI perhaps see ways round and saying we're not infringing, and what are the defences that they can use to rely on. That is probably one of the biggest challenges, I think, generally. The challenge of regulators to try and draft regulation that, one, deals with the current issues that we're aware of and we can grapple with, and also draft it generally enough that it future-proofs it. I do think that is a risk, and I think that's something that's been quite interesting to read about since the EU AI Act was approved last week. One of the things they've said was, we just needed something to get out, but is it a perfect model? Perhaps not. And that's actually one of the reasons why the UK government has been very vocal in saying we don't fully understand it, and therefore we don't think it's appropriate to draft a very top-down piece of legislation that tries to address issues that they don't fully understand. So my view is actually I am supportive of the UK's approach to take more of a sector specific and allow the people who have got a more direct understanding of the risks of that particular sector to understand, actually, these are the risks and this is what the measures that should be put in place. The dangers, I suppose, of having an unregulated AI in a hypothetical world, because obviously there is already existing AI regulation, but it's just the unknown. I think we've already seen the advancements of deepfakes and what we're seeing in that space, and I think we could see some fantastic things with AI if it was unregulated, perhaps. Stuff that we can't even imagine right now. We've seen the advancements in science and cancer diagnosis and what technology can do that maybe that human can't. But I think also, unfortunately, we live in a society that there are bad actors. And if you don't regulate and think about those things, maybe there would be bigger scares, stuff that we can't even imagine right now on another scale. And I think that's the balance of saying, so if you regulate you're able to address the bad actors, and I mean, there'll always be them, sadly, but at least you can try and address them and put a framework in place to prosecute them, or put at least a deterrent in place. I think there can be, and actually that's the driver behind the UK government's approach to AI regulation, is creating a balance between innovation and not stifling it, but also considering and taking into consideration safety. That was definitely what was really a big discussion last year in Bletchley, was around safety and AI, and that is, I think, a global approach. But yes, I think it's the balance, and I think that's one thing that the UK is very focused on, is trying to say regulation shouldn't prevent innovation.